Just like a star across my sky, just like an angel off the page, you have appeared to my life. Feel like I'll never be the same, just like a song in my heart.
I think I need some more tea. Anyway, okay, yeah, now I kind of wanted to talk about the pros and cons of London. I know a lot of you guys have asked me, what's London like, how does it compare with Sydney? Some people have said, oh, you know, I'm so envious of you living in London. I've always really wanted to live in London. And yeah, so I thought, you know, I haven't really gone into much detail in answering some of your questions because I wanted to talk about it here in my vlog. So I've listed out a couple of pros about living in London. Firstly, it's a great location in terms of where it is in the world. It is so close to so many international destinations. It's you know, just on the doorstep of Europe, and there are so many countries there to explore. It's great transport-wise for getting to places internationally. You know, the Eurostar, cheap flights with Ryanair or EasyJet, you know. I'll give you some stats as an example. To get to Paris by train, Eurostar, takes 2.5 hours. To get to Frankfurt in Germany, takes 1.5 hours by flight. To Milan in Italy, it takes 2 hours. To the Balearic Islands off Spain, takes 2.5 hours. And to New York in the States, takes 5 hours by flight. Isn't that great? You know, in Australia, it would take 1.5 hours to get to Melbourne from Sydney. You know, that's the same country, just a different state. The closest international destination is probably New Zealand, and that's at least a few hours, I'm not sure. Or, you know, a lot of people go to Hong Kong, and that's like a good 9-10 hour flight. So London is great for travelling. I am so addicted to travelling now that I've come here. You know, when I was growing up and when I was younger, a lot of my friends, you know, as they hit uni and stuff, they got the travel bug and they really wanted to see the world and do things like that. But I was a real sort of home girl kind of girl. I just wanted to stay home and, you know, hang out with my friends and go out with my boyfriend and, you know, do the normal life, you know, stuff like that. But that's changed since I've come here. I kind of got the travel bug, and yeah, there are so many places I want to see. I'll, you know, share with you my first 5 months in London, which I definitely made the most of travelling Europe. I arrived in May in 2005, and in June I went to Frankfurt. In July I went to Paris, and in August I went to Verona in Italy. And in September I went to Frankfurt, Brussels and Amsterdam. And in October I was in Frankfurt again. The reason I was in Frankfurt so much was because my boyfriend was working there, Kwai, as you guys know. He had a 6-month contract in Frankfurt, so that's why I spent so much time there. But it's a great city as well. I really liked living there for the month or two that I lived there. Alright, so what else is good about London? Well, yeah, it's a real international city. There is so much to see and do in London. It's a huge melting pot of different cultures here. Like, there's so many different kinds of foods, international music, you know, salsa clubs. The salsa scene is huge here compared to Sydney, which has a small salsa scene, but it's very restricted and it's not very big. Whereas over here, there is a lot more authenticity, I guess, of cultures. The salsa clubs here feel like real clubs that, you know, you'd find in Havana or, you know, someplace. you know, and there are local bands here that, you know, has a really thriving music scene. That's something I really should get more into and explore more of London. The music scene here is great. The international cuisine that I've talked about before, imported groceries, that's one thing I love about London actually. You know, my favourite grocery store here is Marks and Spencer's, and it's great because you can get the best food from around the world imported here, and that's something that we don't have in Sydney, because in Australia they have really tight restrictions on importing raw food and groceries and stuff like that. So pretty much all fresh produce is grown in Australia, and because of the whole preserving the Australian natural environment and animals and stuff, they don't allow any sort of fresh produce to be imported. Which sucks, because, you know, I love having fresh, huge king strawberries from the US, you know, US Driscolls, and apples from Germany, and oranges from Valencia, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's very cool. Another good thing about London, as I mentioned before, the transport system is pretty good. It's efficient, it covers pretty much everywhere, and yeah, you don't really need a car to get around in London, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so that's, for me, those are the main pros of being in London. Okay, so what about the cons? What are the bad things about living in London? Well, this one I could go on and on about. Okay, firstly, the biggest and most obvious thing is that London is very expensive. It's probably one of the most, if not the most expensive cities in the world to live. It always comes within the top 5 in all those stats that they put out in articles telling us how expensive London is to live. Yeah, quality here comes at a price. If you want to live decently, eat decently, do anything, you know, to enjoy yourself, it comes at a price, and it's usually a very high price. You know, one of the things I noticed, you know, as I said, when I first arrived, I thought the food here sucked. But that's because I was going for all the cheap stuff. And if you want to find decent quality food, and, you know, food that is healthy, it's not going to be cheap. If you want to get cheap food, it's going to be unhealthy pretty much, and it's going to suck, basically. Yeah, in Sydney, in Australia, you could get decent, healthy food for a fairly cheap price. It was more accessible for everyone. But here, you know, with the whole organic foods and imported foods and fresh, healthy groceries, all that stuff is expensive. Yeah, so that really sucks. Okay, another bad thing about being here, it's pretty overcrowded here. London is definitely the most populated city in the UK, and it's growing every year, as they keep telling us. Yeah, there are so many people living in London, so many people taking the public transport in London, and so that really sucks. The tube is just, it is so packed. I'm talking packed like sardines. I'm quite lucky that I don't work in central London, so I don't have to kind of experience that every day. But when I did have to catch the tube through central London for my last job, that was pretty bad. What else is bad about London? Well, I find life here is quite stressful, much more so than life in Sydney. I think the quality of life in London is actually a lot worse than the quality of life in Sydney. Even though there are so many, you know, benefits about being in London, the general pace of life is very fast. People are always busy. People always have so much to do. It's quite stressful being here. Your working hours are longer. Work is generally more demanding, and there's a whole culture in London of long working hours, and it's getting worse. And people feel like they need to work longer hours to fit in with the culture of the workplace. Yeah, there is less time here to relax, to just kick back, enjoy your leisure activities. Here, being a very, very urban city, with so many people everywhere, it's hard to find peace, I guess. And yeah, a lot of people are very stressed here, including myself. So that's probably actually for me one of the biggest things I don't like about London, and ultimately for me it's the reason I wouldn't stay here permanently. I would not raise a family here. It would just be too difficult for me. I couldn't cope. You know, I'm sort of barely juggling all my various activities and work and life and looking after home and everything like that as it is, without having to kind of raise a family and look after kids and school and everything like that. So yeah, Australia is definitely where I'm going to be raising a family in the future. A couple of other things I don't like about London. The binge drinking culture here. I can't stand the binge drinking culture. I don't really drink much alcohol, and I don't really see the fun in stumbling around like a drunken yob, causing damage to other people, and just basically losing control of your good sensibility, you know. Your IQ goes down to the level of a rat. And yeah, that's just a personal thing for me. I'm not really into drinking. I'm not really into the whole bars and pubs thing. So yeah, that's a big thing here in London. Another thing here I don't like, which is about to change, is the smoking culture. I cannot stand cigarettes. I could go on and on about this, but I really, really hate the smell of cigarettes. I hate being forced to endure cigarette smoke when I'm sitting in a restaurant eating, when I'm in a cafe having a coffee, when I'm standing on the train platform, you know, having smoke blown into my face. I think it's incredibly selfish, and yeah, but come 1st of July, that's going to all change, and I'm very happy about that. Another bad thing about London is obviously the weather. You know, it's getting better now, but the winters here really suck, and Sydney definitely has better weather. And finally, one thing I found difficult about being here, especially initially, is that I found it really hard to make friends here. Even though Australia and England both speak English, I find that the culture is actually quite different. And in my first year or so here, I found the British people to be quite reserved and difficult to warm up to, and I just felt that I didn't really have very much in common with a lot of the typical British people. You know, I was really into kind of more into the outdoors and into the whole healthy lifestyle kind of thing, and most of the, generally Londoners here are into, going out, drinking, going to pubs and bars and smoking and all that kind of stuff, and yeah, there just wasn't very much in common. Yeah, I've still actually not made that many friends here, unfortunately, and that's actually something that's been a bit disappointing for me. When I came over here, I kind of envisaged myself making, a lot of friends over here, and that hasn't really happened for me. I've met, my boyfriend here, obviously, but other than that, I don't have very many friends. So, yeah, that's a bit of a negative thing. And, it's actually probably one of the reasons I've kind of turned to the internet and the whole Web 2.0 thing. I've actually got a lot of friends online now, more so than I have in real life. You could almost even say that my social life is, yeah, kind of hinges around my online social life, which is kind of sad, really, when you think about it. But I guess it's the way of the future. Anyway.
It's late and I'm feeling so tired, having trouble sleeping. This constant calm